stopped picking up my niece after her dad called me a girl for doing housework. Now everyone's mad except the 5-year-old. I, 29 male, and my wife, 30F, have 2 kids, 5 and 3 years old. My wife works a full-time office job, while I work from home with extremely flexible hours. Basically, as long as I meet my deadlines, no one really cares how many hours it took or what time of day I work outside of some Zoom meetings. My sister, 26F, let's call her Barb, and her husband, 30M, let's call him Nick, live nearby and work full-time jobs. They have a daughter, 5F, let's call her Tracy. Because of my comfortable work schedule, when our kids started going to daycare, we basically decided that I'll be dropping off and picking up my niece from daycare alongside my own kids. I didn't really mind, and I thought it was great for my kids to spend time with their cousin. I get along with Tracy as well, and always thought I was her cool uncle. She's a sweet kid and usually well behaved. So anyway, most days I bring her and my kids back to our house, I make them snacks or dinner, and in the afternoon/evening my sister comes to pick them up. A few days ago the 5-yo kids were watching Bluey on the TV as I was preparing snacks with my 3-yo, and I suddenly heard yelling. I rushed over to see what's up, and my son was yelling at her that my dad's not a girl. While my niece yells back he is. He's a F/T. That's like a girl. The word is different in my language, but the meaning holds, as is the distinction between using it versus simply addressing a gay person. I'm kind of in shock at first, but I turned off the TV, and I sat her down and began explaining that this is a very bad word and we shouldn't be calling people that, and that regardless, I'm not a girl. And because this is a bad word, she should apologize to me because we don't act mean to each other in this family, and if I hear this again I'm going to talk to her parents and she's going to get in trouble. She said she won't get in trouble because that's what her dad called me, and he's not in trouble. I was stunned. I told her that regardless of what her dad said, it's a very bad word and she's not to use it with me or in my presence, and that she should apologize regardless because it hurt my feelings, which she did, because she's a really good kid. We talked some more and I prodded her about other things her parents said, and from what I gather, getting info out of a 5-year-old being obviously a difficult and unreliable process. Nick, my Bill, told my sister in Tracy's presence that men shouldn't be sitting at home all day and doing childcare, that cooking is a woman's duty, as is cleaning and really most of the things I do around my house. And that I'm a girl. I interpret this as not really a man, because I do housework and my wife earns more money than me. I explained to her the best I could that men and women could work from an office or from home, and that my wife or Barb working long hours from the office doesn't make them men, and vice versa, but I didn't dwell on it with her since it's not really her fault. I didn't immediately bring it up with my sister because I figured it would be a difficult conversation and I didn't want to have it in front of the kids, and I wanted to talk it out with my wife first as well. I did talk to my wife that evening and she seemed really upset as well. I told her that I think I should demand an apology from Nick and my sister, and she agreed. I called my sister and told her what happened, and she said that it's just a word and I'm blowing it out of proportion, and obviously Nick doesn't dislike me. I said I don't care whether he does or doesn't dislike me, he is talking shit about me behind my back to my niece and to her, and she is apparently very chill about this, rather than standing up for me. She said that was how Nick was, and I should stop being a drama queen. I told her to fuck off, and if that was how she felt she could pick up her own child from daycare, and hung up. I know it was really short notice and rude, but I really felt like I was being disrespected by people I did so much for over the years, and were my family. My wife said she understood, and that I shouldn't back down until I at least get a proper apology. The next 2 days were a weekend and there was no daycare. I assumed there would be calls or texts from Barb, but there was nothing. In fact, the suspicious lack of any messages or calls made me think she didn't take my words seriously, and this actually got me even more angry. The calls did come when it was time to pick up Tracy for daycare and I, obviously, didn't come. I dropped my own kids off, and didn't even answer for a while. I know it was petty, but I was stewing for 2 days and figured letting Barb stew for a few hours seemed really appropriate and felt really good. Around noon when she called again I did pick up. I was going to smugly tell her that I was ready for my apology, and we would put it behind us, but I didn't get to. Instead, she went off on me, about how I was irresponsible and I flaked, and she was so late for work because of me, to which I just said I told you I wasn't going to pick her up. You had 2 days to make arrangements. And she kept yelling at me, so I hung up again. She kept calling and sending me texts about picking Tracy up from daycare, to which I said I will not be, then stopped replying. When I came to pick my kids up, Tracy was expecting me to take her as well, and I didn't, which was very rough on me and her both. Like, I know it's not her fault and she's 5, and she suddenly doesn't get to go over to our place and play and have snacks, but at the same time, I didn't want to just let this thing go. I felt like I deserved an apology, and still do, so I explained that me and her mom were fighting, but I'll pick her up again when we work it out. She obviously didn't take it well, because she's 5, but I apologized, took my kids and left. Well, a bit later I got a call from my mom. Barb roped her into picking up Tracy, but my mom is disabled, so she was having a really hard time with Tracy, and asked me why I was being mean to Barb. I told her everything, expecting her to take my side, but instead she also pulled a "you know how Nick is," to which I replied that the more I realize how Nick is the less I like it, and if he thinks all this shit in general and about me specifically, I sure as fuck ain't going to be doing free labor for him. She said I was blowing this all out of proportion, and I told her I wasn't the one doing it, because all I asked for was a fucking apology, and everyone else seemed to prefer all of this shit to just giving it to me, to which she said I should just be the bigger man and not let it get to me, to which I said I was done and to have fun with Tracy. That evening I got a call from Nick himself, which I was hesitant about, but chose to answer on the off chance that I was actually about to get that apology. Nope. Apparently my behavior is causing Barb great distress and we're family, and how can I do this to my own sister? I told him that since we're family, how can he talk shit about me to his kid, which I take care of daily, and he said he was only joking, and it was all in good fun. I told him it was neither good nor fun for me, and I want my apology. He blew up on me, telling me I was a F/T and couldn't take a joke, and called me a hysterical little girl. I told him to fuck off and that I was done with him and hung up. This led to a bunch of calls from Barb and my mom, which I didn't answer. Barb texted me that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price for me being petty, and I told her that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price of her parents being ungrateful pieces of shit, to which she just yelled at me a bunch about how she was going to lose her job and I was being cruel to her and to mom. I told her I was done, and unless her next message was an apology I'll be blocking her number, and it wasn't, so now I blocked her. Past few days my mom's been picking up Tracy and it's been really rough seeing her in daycare and explaining that grandma's going to pick her up, which she hates, and tells me she isn't having fun with grandma and wants to come over to our place, and it's breaking my heart, but at the same time, I never got a single apology from anyone but the 5 and I feel like letting this go would just be telling my family that it's okay to ignore my boundaries. But at the same time I do love my niece and I don't want to traumatize her or have her resent me. She is a good kid and none of it is her fault. So, Ada? And what do I do? The angle of Nick actually wanting Barb to quit her job is not one I considered, but now I think it might actually have merit, and it makes me very worried for her. At the same time I can't really do much until she at least acknowledges that that's just how Nick is, so stop overreacting isn't going to fly with me. I also assume it's only a matter of time until my mom is no longer an option. She's already having a hard time, so I hope I get a chance to talk to her about it, ideally because she sees my point of view, but I'll settle for because she's desperate. I don't know what sort of childcare they'll be able to afford. They took out a large mortgage on a house they can barely afford. I will also make certain to stress upon Tracy that I love her and none of this is her fault. Update 1. Just to clarify a few things, my dad died from a heart attack 2 years ago, which came as no surprise because he smoked a lot and lived a pretty unhealthy life, so we weren't really surprised. It wasn't his first either. He was a great grandpa and a great dad before that and right up to the end. But his death left my mom alone and she doesn't work. My mom has MS, which is basically mostly steady, but slowly gets worse over time and flares up occasionally, and is made worse by stress, which my mom goes through now. A flare-up often means the level she gets back to isn't quite what it was before, so we mostly try to keep her stress-free. My dad had life insurance so her house is paid for and she had a little money, but there's also a caretaker coming over 3 times a week to clean, cook, do shopping etc., which she can't afford, so me and my wife pay for. As I mentioned in a comment on the original post, me and my wife are doing probably better off financially than Barb and Bill. They have a fancy house and fancy cars, but they have a mortgage and loans, so the great response I got made me think about this shit again, and I thought how I could stand my ground without giving up on Tracy altogether, and figured there was no perfect solution, and I had to settle on something / I took the day off work because I just needed to process and deal with this shit. One comment on the original post really got to me, about how someone would feel in Tracy's place, and I just can't do it to her now. I know this isn't the update some of you have wanted, but I just can't. I love her like she was one of my own, and my kids do as well, and it's not her fault. I unblocked my sister because obviously if I'm going to be interacting with her child, she needs to be able to reach me. I talked to my mom during the day and she was, again, distraught about having to pick Tracy up, which is pretty hard on her. I told her I was willing to do it, but I'm coming over and she's going to have to hear me out, to which she agreed. I talked to her for a long time, avoiding snark and lashing out this time, and just explaining that basically how serious Nick was or how he is doesn't matter. I used that rocking the boat analogy someone linked to in comments, and further stressed my point by saying that it shouldn't matter if I was justified or not in getting upset. I am her child, and if something upset me it at least warrants giving me the benefit of the doubt before siding against me, and eventually it seemed to come through. She apologized and we hugged it out, and I think she got it. She's not a very confrontational person and generally really tries to keep the peace, and this time she went about it wrong. I'm not saying I'm not mad, but she's my mom and she apologized. I explained to her that she shouldn't be covering for me because that means I have no leg to stand on when confronting Nick and Barb, and she was receptive to it. I texted my sister that we needed to talk and I'll drop Tracy off at their place tonight, to which I got a stoic thumbs up. I picked Tracy up from daycare today and she was overjoyed. She was actually a little possessive of me, staying by my side all afternoon instead of running off to play, which was cute but also made me feel like shit a little, because that's impact me not picking her up. I explained to the best of my ability that she's not in trouble and I'm not angry with her, but I am /angry with her parents and we need to work that out, but I'll do my best to not stop picking her up anymore, which she was really happy about. I dropped her off in the evening and once she was in bed I sat down to talk with Barb and Nick. I told them flat out that Mom wasn't going to be covering for them anymore, and if they didn't let me finish what I had to say, I would get up and leave, and they can find new arrangements for Tracy. Didn't mean it, but they don't need to know that. They weren't happy but they were willing to listen, so that's progress, or at least the threat working. I explained that this was the situation now. I don't need them to mean their apology, but I sure as fuck was going to need one. This was principle now. I have spent years taking care of their child, and if they wanted to be assholes, I wasn't going to do it for free. So this was how it goes now. 1. I am no longer going to be dropping her off in the morning until further notice. There was no excuse for the way Nick acted and it needed to have some lasting impact. 2. I was no longer going to be paying for family outings and family vacations. It was a man's job to support his family, so good luck with that. The exception is Tracy, who is always welcome. 3. If I hear any more BS being talked about me behind my back, I was going to start charging them for my service. My plan was to dangle the thing they want, childcare. Restoring it, but at the same time giving some repercussions and threat of things getting hard for them again. I also laid it on pretty thick about how I am a man, so I obviously have my pride and can't have that be disrespected, even by my own family who I obviously love. Don't really consider Nick family but figured he wouldn't figure that out. Nick was not happy about this, and my sister actually had to take him outside to talk it out without me, but eventually they did agree to it, and I got my, admittedly half-hearted, apology. I could probably press it further, but I didn't want to risk having to either back down or hurt Tracy again, so I took this. There were no tears and no warm hugs, but I get to walk away with what I wanted, giving them some payback without having to give up my time with Tracy. I still plan to talk to my sister alone about her relationship with Nick and about how she sees me, but I figure I should let things calm down a bit before I do. Now on to second story. Left my husband, who prioritizes his mother over our marriage, after he chose fixing her Wi-Fi over our first ultrasound. I, 29F, have been married to my husband, 35 male, for 5 years, and we've been together for nearly 10. On paper, everything seemed fine, but in reality, our marriage has been anything but. I've reached my breaking point, and I need to know if I'm the one in the wrong here. From the beginning, my mill has been a nightmare. She made everything about her from day one. At our wedding, she wore white, claiming it was a family tradition. It wasn't. She constantly criticizes me, from my cooking to my appearance. I'll never forget the time she called me fat at a family gathering, right in front of everyone. And what did my husband do? Nothing. Not a single word to defend me. It didn't stop there. She has accidentally destroyed my belongings, including my grandmother's necklace, which she threw out because it looked like cheap costume jewelry. She's gone out of her way to make me feel small and unwelcome in my own home. But every time I tried to talk to my husband about it, he'd brush it off, saying I was overreacting or being too emotional. And then there's my husband. He's always on Reddit, constantly giving strangers relationship advice, which is laughable considering how he treats me. He spends more time rating women's boobs on Reddit than talking to me. Literally. And just so you know, the last pair he rated weren't a 4 out of 10, they were a 10 out of 10. Yeah, he's got plenty of time to do that but can't be bothered to remember anything about my life. He'll forget my birthday, our anniversary, even simple things like what I'm working on or what's important to me, but he has a perfect memory for his work schedule and things that matter to him. When we fight, he becomes incredibly hostile and always throws in a sarcastic buddy at the end of his sentences, like I'm some acquaintance he can barely tolerate. And he never cleans the house, the dishes, laundry, you name it, it's all on me. It's like he thinks being an adult is optional, as long as he's got his job and his Reddit account. The final straw came a few weeks ago. I'm 5 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter. My mill started making comments about how she'll have to whip the girl into shape and how she'll raise her to be tough because I'm too soft. When I told my husband that I didn't want his mother to have too much influence on our daughter, especially with the way she treats me, he just laughed it off, saying his mother means well and that I was overthinking it. But the moment that truly broke me was when we were talking about future childcare, and my husband suggested that his mother should watch our daughter while we work. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that, especially considering how his mother treats me, and he snapped. He called me paranoid and said I should get over it because his mother was going to be a big part of our daughter's life whether I liked it or not. This is the same woman who believes corporal punishment is okay. I've seen her hit my husband's nephew for the smallest things, and no one does anything about it. It's like they're all living in some kind of cult, and I'm finally waking up to the reality of what's going on. If he wouldn't stand up for me, how could I expect him to stand up for our child? I started to fear for what kind of environment our daughter would grow up in, a place where she might be belittled or bullied by her own grandmother, with a father who wouldn't do anything to stop it. Oh, and did I mention that he missed our first ultrasound? His mother needed him to help her with something urgent. It turned out to be fixing her Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi? He chose that over seeing our daughter for the first time. That told me everything I needed to know about where I stand in his life. So, I packed up and left. I'm done living like this. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I've already contacted a lawyer. You can't scare me into complying anymore because I have all those texts. You know exactly which ones I'm talking about. So, Stefan, I wish you all the best in your future marriage, with your mother and the women of Reddit whose boobs you don't even deserve. Update 1. Stefan has seen this post. He is mad that apparently one of you found him based on the rate my boobs thing. He has deleted his account. For any purposes, I want to clarify that I left out any actual incriminating information that could lead to doxing him. Any and all people who are pretending to know me or have any incorporated, ruminating information about me are lying. I am not from South Carolina, I am not moving in with any other guy, and I'm also not sleeping around. Oop, I'm legit the side chick in my marriage, yeah. The point is you created an account and wanted everyone on your side so you can do a childish thing just to get at your husband you have been with for 10 years. You are part of the problem, that is why oop, I don't know you guys. While it's nice to have people cheering and telling me their stories, there is nothing to be gained from unknown internet strangers. You have no real bearing in my life, so having you on my side makes no difference. The point of this is setting a loud statement, the only way my soon-to-be ex-husband cares about. Oop replying to a deleted comment, baby no. If anyone treats you like Stefan treated me, leave. This is not normal. A few months ago, I got to witness what an actual healthy relationship is like. A partner should be attentive, care about you, and want to do this for you and with you. They should be fire and flame when it comes to making relationship work. Not just let you carry all the burden. Marriage should not be hard. Only life in marriage should be what makes life manageable. This is not normal. Took me a few months to understand. But you will also understand when you grow. Oop, I made a friend through work who invited me over for dinner. Her husband was there, and I saw how they interacted. It was really small, but that was basically what triggered the whole deconstruction. He has since also come to work to surprise her, and she has dragged me along to find tiny silly gifts for him. She is always so excited to go home to see him. He always brings her something home. Last week, she came in with a shiny rock he had found for her, and she proudly put it next to her desktop. Oop, they really are. And I have a lot to thank them. It's like the loving slap-o needed to wake up from this nightmare. Especially when we were out not even clubbing but at a night museum tour, and I was being bombarded by calls because he was trying to make me feel bad for being out. My friend looked at me concerned and asked me if I noticed that her husband had texted her only once. I was convinced that going out was awful for everyone. Oop, you can if both of you signed a document and are over the minimum renting time. For us, it was 3 years. I gave needed notice, plus it's an individual, not an agency, so they have more leeway. I am sure I'd have been fucked if we had done our leasing trough an agency because as I have heard, they tell you to go pound sand. I also didn't just call today and got it done. It has been in the making a little longer. Today is just D-Day. Oop also states she is not in the US. Update 2. Some people on Reddit have been pretending to know me and spreading false claims. They've said I'm a deadbeat who doesn't work and that Stefan has 2 jobs to support me. They even fabricated a story about a neighbor, who supposedly is a good friend of ours, saying I've been sleeping around and moving in with the guys I supposedly had affairs with. None of this is true. We don't live in South Carolina or the UK, and we're not friends with any of our neighbors. I have never cheated on Stefan, and I work and make slightly more than him, just $1 an hour difference. I suspect these claims might be from trolls brigading or Stefan's friends trying to make me regret posting about this. I am safe and staying with family, which is all I'm going to say for now. I'm working with my lawyer to ensure our safety, and that's all I can disclose at this time. For women who find themselves in my situation and are dealing with a lease, consult with a pro bono lawyer who specializes in rental rights. That's what I did. They can give you advice specific to your country or region. In my case, I was able to move out because Stefan and I had both signed a lease contract and had completed the minimum rental period. After my free consultation, I worked with my landlords, who are a lovely older couple, to arrange my departure. So don't be scared. You can be scared, but there are things you can do to protect yourself. Also, make sure to run a credit check on yourself. I did, and it's another issue I'm addressing. As for recent developments, there hasn't been much new. Stefan is clearly desperate. He and my mill have both had meltdowns and launched separate smear campaigns. My mill has spread false claims, including that I'm an unfit mother and that I've been abandoning my responsibilities. I don't plan to answer these claims publicly. I'm collecting all evidence I have, especially since she has nothing to back up her accusations, but I have everything to back up mine. So, no, Stefan, this is not going to be a he said, she said situation. He deleted his Reddit account, claiming it was because one person found him. But then he told me a bunch of people sent him death threats, which seems impossible and contradictory. He did send his friends to my post, and I think they sent me some unsavory DMs and comments. Allegedly. When I tried to talk to Stefan, he always made me feel like I was going crazy. Whenever I raised concerns or expressed feelings, he would dismiss them, belittle my emotions, and make me second-guess myself. For instance, I'd come home to find that he had invited people over without informing me in advance. When I brought it up, he'd insist that he had mentioned it earlier, even though I knew he hadn't. Another time, I planned a special meal and asked him for a specific dish, but he claimed I had requested something completely different. When I reminded him of what I had actually asked for, he'd argue that I must have forgotten my own request. Stefan would also insist he had completed tasks that I had actually done myself. For example, he would claim he had handled a household chore when I was the one who actually took wth.reddit. When I pointed this out, he'd dismiss my recollection and insist that he had done it. Even in conversations about our relationship, Stefan would frequently deny things he had said or done. If I brought up issues I had with his mother's behavior, he'd claim, "You never mentioned that before. You're just being overdramatic." This made me question whether I had ever truly discussed these problems or if I was indeed overreacting. At one point, I was so convinced that I had early onset dementia or schizophrenia that I started to question my own sanity. I felt lost and confused, struggling to distinguish between reality and his version of events. I began to document our interactions just to keep track of what was actually happening. But Stefan would always find a way to twist things, saying, "You must be misremembering," even though I had clear evidence to the contrary. Feeling so powerless, I realized that sharing my story online was the only way to present my truth in a manner he couldn't manipulate. I wanted to ensure that there was a clear and unchangeable record of what had happened. Posting about my experiences was a crucial step in reclaiming my voice and finding support from others who might understand my situation.